Hey guys, how are we today? I first want to apologize for Monday, as I was attempting to go over some of the stuff with you guys on 30, 60, 90 right triangles. I kept getting, I kept seeing my phone out of the corner of my eye light up, and I ignored it for quite some time. And then finally, because they kept calling back, I completely forgot that I was supposed to be in a administrative meeting for graduation at the same time. So I apologize for that. Had I known, I would have rescheduled our time. Hopefully you were able to take a look at some of the notes that I provided and were able to, if necessary, watch the video that I had with the regular geometry class. And hopefully that helped, and I do apologize for that. One of the reasons that I wanted us in Zoom today is so that if you have any questions that you can ask out loud and I can answer. I wanted to let you know first and foremost that I was up very late last night making sure that throughout the day I was able to grade late work, grade on time work, email back and forth with students, so on and so forth. But one of the things that came to my attention is I did get an email from a student asking how come a 0 was in the grade book for something that they had done. And she thought that it wasn't due until the 5th, and that was just a benchmark. Again, please keep in mind that when we talk about benchmark dates, they are they're supposed to mimic what would have been an actual due date in a normal day of school. And that's just to keep us on track so that we don't get too far behind with thinking that it's okay that if I don't get to it today, that I'll be able just to get to it tomorrow. And then what ends up happening is if we put it off for too long, one thing that we put off rolls into 2 things that we put off, rolls into 3 things that we put off, and now we're 6, 7 things behind. And I don't want that to happen. So because I tell everyone that here's the benchmark date, I want to make sure I put it in the grade book. The other thing that I want to make clear is where one person is concerned why they have a 0, I've had emails on the other end saying, hey, I did this assignment a week and a half ago. Are you going to grade it? How come I haven't even seen anything in the grade book for it? Was that just busy work? And of course, no, the answer is no, it's not busy work. It is supposed to prepare you for the next level, essentially for application of the information. Truly, you are going to see some of these items again on standardized tests. We, I guess, lucked out that we didn't have an EOC this year, but this material is on SATs and ACTs and used later. So obviously, it's not busy work, especially if we're trying to center in on the most important stuff now. So please understand that if you looked at the grade book and you're concerned as to why something is a 0, you will take note that it can still be turned in. You absolutely can still turn anything in. Just make sure that you make me aware that you are turning it in. That way, if I miss it, I have that, double check email just to make sure that I get to it. And also you'll probably take note that I did assign 9.3 and 9.4 in knowre. They're not in the computer yet because again, our benchmark due dates have not necessarily been reached yet. So please keep that in mind, that I'm trying to make sure that I'm someplace in the middle of the requests, giving us these, due dates so that we don't fall behind, but also making sure that people know that I am paying attention, but I just don't want anyone on either end to feel overwhelmed. So I'm kind of meeting someplace in the middle. If you feel that I have missed something, If you think that I have not graded something appropriately, if you think that you did turn it in and you're not sure why I haven't graded it, please make sure you address that just in a nice email. I will say one or two that I get it. You've turned it in. I understand that it's been turned in, and it very well could have been turned in later than the benchmark date. And at that point, just like in the school year, I try to take care of the information that has been handed in on time first. It has not been that you have been disregarded. It is just trying to get through the list of things digitally. And I appreciate always being reminded, but please do not feel that I have forgotten. So just kind of make sure as you're double checking with all your teachers, you are aware of how hard we are working. So that's grades. Email with any concerns. Secondly, and probably more importantly, on May 22nd, we are told that we are to assign no new material. And that way, after May 22nd, anything that is late, anything that needs extra help, anything that needs reteaching so that we understand it better, so that we can, move forward and hopefully fix some of the things that we should have been doing originally, we have that time to do so. I also know that many of you plan on going on to Honors Algebra 2 and may have already seen your schedule for next year. And obviously I taught Honors Algebra 2 this year, so I know the curriculum very well and I know what material is being covered. Understand that after May 22nd, even though I am going to not assign any new material, you may find a survey that comes out to you asking what your feeling is for the rest of the year, and even to some extent into the summer, depending upon what you want. We all need a break, and I get that. But if you're interested in me continuing with the geometry material that will be pertinent for Algebra 2, as well as possibly reviewing material that would be necessary for you to be competent going into Algebra 2 next year, I want you to know that I'm here and can help you prepare for that. So again, it does not need to be something that we feel is a requirement or a necessity or an absolute, but I want you to kind of think about what do you want so that you feel more relaxed and comfortable moving into the next school year. Does that make sense? Can anybody give me any feedback? Am I making sense?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I know that the Zoom is intended for us to communicate. You also know I talk a lot, but I just want to try to be clear. I don't want us to be overwhelmed. And I think that's something that I'm fearful of, that people might think that it is a requirement. I just want to be able to help. And I know how, having granted been a high school student years ago, but I do know how much pressure some of us put on ourselves, and I don't want us to feel that pressure. But I also want you all to know how absolutely amazingly proud I am of how you have focused, how you have done the work that I've asked you to do as if this is normal, and that you haven't lowered your standards. And I understand grading scales have changed, and I understand that looking at a grading scale may somehow affect the way you look at your efforts and your work, but truly understand that no matter what the numbers say, what's important, and the standards that have always been set for you, and how hard you want to work and how much you want to work or how capable you are, and keep things in perspective. But just know that I notice, and there are some of you who have still produced exceptional work regardless, and I'm very proud of all of you for that, that you've stayed focused and that you've not just let situations slow you down. And I know, especially from my end, I got pulled away on Monday. Um, Truly 30 seconds before I logged in, I was handling two screaming children who were fighting over the stairwell. So I know that in the households, it's not easy to stay focused um, and to just concentrate on pretending the situation isn't what it is so that we can continue to learn and work. So I am very appreciative of how hard you all are working. So thank you. With that, off my soapbox, I'm done chatting. I just want you to know that I've noticed and I appreciate all of you for how hard you're focused. So I've also received emails concerning some of the knowre questions. And I want to make sure that if there are any additional questions, you can ask while we're here. But I just checked my email and I have it on my phone so that I can check it as we're working. And that way I don't miss anything. But I pulled some questions that have been popping up concerning all of our knowre sections. And as I'm looking at your classes specifically, there are still some of you that need to finish the 9-1. There are more of you that need to finish the 9-2. And then obviously 9-3 and 9-4 specifically are there. So with that, I want to make sure that I touch on some of these. What I am going to do is do the work on a separate sheet of paper so that you can kind of follow along, but I want to be able to load both just so that you can see how the questions look without the clutter of all the other stuff. So we're going to go all the way back to our altitude on hypotenuse, our similar triangles with right triangles. And I was getting still some questions and just some comments that the 9-1 was very difficult. And it is, it always is. Even if we are traditionally in a classroom, the 9-1 section is always the most difficult. And one of the things that we talked about in the 9-1 was looking at our original right triangle and first identifying, or at least having memorized, that there are 3 triangles. You already saw the one showed up, and then I put the altitude in, and the other 2 show up. And when we do this, immediately we create this reflexive angle and this reflexive angle. And when we have our reflexive angles, they could be any value, but these 2 guys in our original large triangle are complementary, which means its complement has to also show up there. And this one's complement has to show up there. So it does make it a little easier to follow a pattern when we're going to name these. So if triangle ACB in number 1 is the first one they give us, it allows us to see what that pattern is. ACB is our big triangle. And in this one, it starts us with our blue, then it takes us to orange, and then it takes us to our right angle. So that means every time I label this, I need to make sure that I'm labeling it in the same fashion, blue, orange, right. So I can start up here and I have A, B, D, blue, orange, right. And then I'm going to do the same thing for the last one, blue, orange, right. And that way I'm naming it correctly, but more so I've concentrated on the pattern. So that seemed to come up a bit, and I wanted to make sure that I address that accordingly. The next one that has come up is actually number 2. And in number 2, we have, now that we're trying to find our values. And it does say NR is 15 and NK is 18. And I can't tell you the number of times that I've actually done this and sent this over through email. And it comes down to, don't look at the picture, look at what was given to you in the directions. And I don't know if it's just the way this particular question came up, but I did click on this enough that it came up again. It says right here, NR is 15. So if I redrew this, I could write it there, but it says NK is 18. Now I get it. In the picture, the 18 hovers real close here. And in fact, the way it hovers what looks like between M and N. They don't do this. That would allow us to look at it as a full segment, as the full hypotenuse. Had we had that, I don't think there would have been as much confusion, but they didn't have to because it says NK all the way across. And it does want us to find MN. So that's the segment here. Well, if they're asking for MN, they're not going to just tell us here, plug in 18 and you're done. So this one's using our leg squared equals part times hypotenuse. So if you don't have your formulas in front of you, the a squared equals x times c, you can memorize it this way. So it ends up being 15 squared equals mn, which is our part, times 18. And we end up with 225 equals 18 times the missing piece. Now, if I take 225 and divide it by 18, it does say 12.5 on my calculator. Remember, it could be that we need to plug it in as 12.5 to get it correct. So that may also be the hang up, is we're still trying to use decimals when it's fractions that we're looking for. The most recent question I received we'll look at number 6 first, because I think number 9 is going to address it. Number 6, we have, instead of it telling us that we have an altitude, it's telling us again in the directions. So we're being told in number 6 that our altitude is BD. So that means in my own scrap paper, if I'm doing this with my computer, which also probably is the issue for some, is we're not writing things down. We can put in this right angle because altitude tells me I can do that. It then tells me MP is this 10 and MD is 2. And it wants us to find that. So it's actually the same formula that we just used. Our leg squared equals part times the full hypotenuse. So MB squared equals 2 times 10. And that does mean we're going to have to take the square root of 20, and when we plug it in, 4 times 5 would give us 2 radical 5. Not a decimal, but again, the radical. So I think that might have been the issue, not necessarily that we didn't know the formula. So I'm hoping that at least reviews some of the issues some of us are having with the 9-1. The one that keeps coming up is number 9, and I will show you that this was one of the questions that I was asked most recently. I think that's as far as I can zoom out for the moment. But here's my answers. This is the way the problem looked. And you can see that you could either use the formula from your sheet or this, the leg squared equals part times the whole hypotenuse. So leg squared equals part, the whole hypotenuse, you have to add that together. So 2 plus x plus 10 is actually that. And what ends up happening is we end up with a quadratic, which does mean we've got to bring everything back. And that, I think, was an issue that we forgot from algebra, that we've got to do our quadratic. So I pulled another example, and it, again, I just clicked on the same one, and I will load this, but I clicked on it again to see if there was a different question, and that's what was given. So if I do this one again, we have the same idea where we're going to have to take that leg squared, that x minus 1, and set it equal to the full hypotenuse times the part. And what we end up doing here is you have to square x minus 1. The part is 9, and the full hypotenuse is that x plus 9. We got to add those together. And I don't know, I always like putting the variables first. So here's that x plus 9. I have to remember that it's the FOIL method over here. And on the other side, it's the distributive property. And if I forget that part, that's what's going to mess this up as well. So now over here, x times x, and then x times negative 1 is x squared minus x, another minus x, and a positive 1. And so I will tell you, one of the main things I see even through Algebra 2 is looking at this and forgetting that anything squared is something times itself. So we end up with x squared minus 2x plus 1, and then 9x plus 81. And we've got to bring all that back. So that means I've got to subtract 9x, and I have to subtract 81. And that way I'm looking at x squared minus 11x minus 80 equals 0. And now that's the tough part. When we look at 80, we're looking at two factors of 80. I don't know about you guys, but 10 and 8 come to mind. Well, that's not going to end up being negative 11 if I subtract. And so then I go through, okay, well, what else is going to multiply to get 80? Well, then we have 2 and 40. And so what we need to do is we need to know our factors for 80. And I do believe 16 times 5 are the factors for 80. And so I just double checked it on my calculator to make sure, and negative 80 would end up being a negative 16 times 5. And that's just brain bubble, just to kind of show where we got that from. So when we factor to solve, we know that we're going to want to have a negative 16 and a positive 5 when we factor our quadratic. It's called the zero product property. When you take each of these products or each of these factors, because it was multiplied together, that's why it's a product, and we set them equal to 0. I'm going to add 16 to both sides, so I end up with x equals a positive 16, and over here it's going to end up being a negative 5. Now, not because we just disregard the negative because it's negative. In algebra, it could work. But up here, if I had a negative 5, this whole length turns to negative 6. That's not going to work. Negative 5 as a length isn't going to work. So because it doesn't work in our problem, it's not possible. So what we end up finding is x, in this case, is 16. And that's only because the other one didn't work in the scenario. But I did find that I think going back and looking at some of the questions, our major hangup was, first, this was completely different than what we've done. 2, we had to rely on a lot of similar triangle stuff and algebra. So I did want to take some time with that. Looking at you guys, again, most of you are okay. If for some reason you feel I graded your 9-1 faster than you wanted me to, you can keep working. I think it's still good through next week. And if not, even after, you're still able to work on it. But you need to email me and let me know that you've updated your score, and I will update your score as well. So hopefully these have helped. 9-2. I didn't do a whole bunch with 9-2 in our online at-home learning because it was all Pythagorean theorem. So what I did was I did pull 2 questions just to kind of give us an idea of what we were looking for, kind of a reminder. And the 2 questions I pulled were 8 and 10. And it does say, determine the exact length of the missing side. Well, in number 8, don't forget with the Pythagorean theorem, it could also be that they want our radical answer. So we end up with leg squared plus leg squared equals hypotenuse squared. So this is an a squared plus b squared equals c squared situation. 100 plus 49 is going to end up being 149. Brady. And when I take the square root, I have the square root of 149 is x. Well, even if I go to my calculator and I look at what 149 is, I can try to divide that by 3. That doesn't work. 149, I'm not going to try anything with an even number. So I am going to try 7. That's not going to work. 149 divided by the next one, we could try 9. Nope. 149 divided by 11. 149 divided by 13. 14 is not going to work. 15 is not going to work. 16 is not going to work. So what I'm trying to figure out here is there a value? Now, 144 is 12. If I took 144 and divided it by 12, it would have worked. So even if I keep going, what I'm going to find out is logically there isn't an answer. So what you're looking at is your radical 149 is where we're going to stop. So keep in mind that in some cases, that's just it. And because it wants exact length, it's looking for that exact answer. Now, the only other one that I thought might cause some issues was number 10. Number 10 says, which are not Pythagorean triples. And what it did was it gave us these little boxes to check in. So here are all the choices that they gave us. And for number 10, I'm really hoping that you see from our list, oops. And I specifically wrote not very big even in the problem because I wanted you to pay attention, because initially I was ready to click. I was like, oh, 9, 40, 41. That's one of the 6 triples I gave you. I gave you 11, 60, and 61, and I told you that those two specifically, when we memorize, they don't come up a whole bunch, but it's possible. So the idea, though, behind Pythagorean triples is that they don't repeat. There isn't an irrational decimal. So right away, I know that 9, 40, and 41, that's yes. We had that memorized as one of our Pythagorean triples. I will also tell you, if you look really closely, 9, 12, 20. 3 times 3, 4 times 3. So we have to look here, 9, 12, 20. It almost looked 3 times 3, 4 times 3. This one kind of messes it up. So it almost looked like a triple, but let's check. And what we're looking for is, are they going to be equal? And if it is a triple, it's going to come out to be equal, because that's the whole point of our Pythagorean theorem for right triangles. So we end up with 225 on one side, but on the other side, 20 squared is 400. Doesn't work. So this one's no. And it's because it's not equal to. And so what I can do is I can test each one of these. And I can test, is 1.2 squared, you can see now I'm just doing it all in my calculator, plus 3.5 squared. These two is 13.69. What's 3.7 squared? It is. And what we find out is that works. It's a yes, because they're equal. I can test 1/5, 1/2, 3/5. And I'm looking to make sure that they're equal. So even if I do 1 ABC 5 in parentheses and square it, and add it to, again in parentheses, 1 ABC 2 and square it, this one gives me 29 over 100. Is that equal to 9/25? Again, squaring that. They're not equal. So we've got the first 4 taken care of. One that we saw was a triple for sure, because it was memorized. The other one we almost thought was a triple, but that last number kind of messed things up. So then the only other one we need to check is 6, 63, and 65. And we need to check, is 6 squared plus 63 squared? That's going to be 4005. 65 squared is not. So we end up in all these other cases with either acute or obtuse triangles. So now what we're looking at is everywhere that we came up with a no. So what happens is we see decimals and we see fractions, and we automatically think, oh, that's not a triple. It is when it makes the right triangle. It is not a triple when it doesn't. So I thought that was something as a good review. All right. Last but not least, I pulled 2 questions from 9-3. We spent a lot of time in the last Monday, Wednesday, and then Monday on 30, 60, 90 and our 45, 45. And just on Monday, I had 8 examples that I took out of our knowre section 9-4. It's at my YouTube channel. I won't waste your time today going over any of that. But number 9 on our 9-3 did ask us to just find the 2 missing lengths. And I fear that a lot of this is making sure we're not afraid to use our radical. So in this one, where we have opposite each of our congruent sides, should be that radical 7. Make sure you're writing your formula. Opposite the 45 is A. Opposite the 45 is A. Opposite the 90 is A radical 2. So right away you can see that the side with the value and the formula are equal to each other. So that means this side is radical 7. And this side, we plug in radical 7, which gives us that radical 14. And I believe we did something similar to this already, because that radical 14 seems to keep popping up. So it could be that I've now clicked on that number 9 enough that it's come full turn. So SV is radical 7 and LV is radical 14. So also make sure that you are very careful as to what numbers you're plugging in where. You may have done it correct on your paper. Make sure you're plugging it in correctly next to the problem open slot. And last, number 10 says RNA, sounds like a science class, RNA is a biology thing. If you haven't taken, it's like DNA, but RNA. We have an isosceles right triangle with the hypotenuse Rn. And in this one, it's telling you what value the hypotenuse is. This is just testing, do you know the formula? And instead of using A or X, they've labeled our hypotenuse D radical 2. So before we go too far, remember, if this was any other problem, we'd say, okay, opposite our congruent angles would be A, and A radical 2. And in any problem, we would circle the value with the formula and set them equal to each other. A radical 2 equals the value they gave me. And in any problem, we'd say, okay, let's divide the radical 2 away from A. And we would see that everywhere we have an A, we want to put D. And it is going to be that each side in our problem, it asks us to plug in for NA and for RA, you would plug in D for both. So we're not looking for a number, and I did have someone ask specifically about that question. You are going to plug in D, and that's it. So I know that reviewed a lot of the knowre questions, because I wanted to make sure anybody who was still struggling but didn't know how to ask, I could go over that. Are there any questions at this point that I have missed that you would like for me to address? Say the word and I will take care of it. Otherwise, what we'll most likely do is continue to check Yes, Mr. Kidd, unmute yourself, sir.
This is more of just a general question. So in an earlier post on Google Classroom, we said that we didn't have to send you pictures of our knowre assignments anymore. But then later on, you
Well,
said email me the
no.
pictures.
What it is when knowre has the due date. So every time I load a knowre assignment, I let you know what the benchmark is. Like the 5th was for one of the assignments, but in the actual knowre program, I put the due date for like the 11th or the 17th. And that way it kind of still gives you some wiggle room if you were late to get it in. The problem is what happens when it no longer shows up in your assignments. So like when you click on your assignment tab and you go there and you go to work on it, all of a sudden it's not there anymore because the expiration date in the program itself has come up. So then it removes that as an opportunity for you to complete it. However, you can still choose to do any of those knowre assignments on your own. So for instance, you could go back and do something from chapter 3 if you so choose. It doesn't prevent you from doing any of that, and it doesn't prevent you from actually making progress. So if the time has elapsed in the knowre program, then you can send me a screenshot of your progress. Up
Oh,
until
okay.
that deadline, you have I can still go back and look. But once that deadline's up, it shows up in my program as well as you're done. So understand, like say for instance, the time elapsed and you only had a 60% and you'd only finished like 7 of the 12 problems. Well, I'll go in the grade book and only give you half credit for not finishing the entire assignment, but you're like, I've worked really hard. I want full credit. Here, Calf, I did finish it. Can you give me full credit? And that's when you take the screenshot when it's no longer in the assignment list. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Yep, absolutely. Are there any other questions concerning any of the assignments, any of the, I'm trying to think, any of the assignments, any of the graded work, any of the knowre questions, you name it, anything at all. Summer work, after May 22nd work, anything that I can answer while I have you live, at least words. All right, please check Google Classroom for any and all updates. Make sure you use the opportunities that we're going over, some of how to do the work, to also complete those assignments yourself. I think with the 30, 60, 90, I've done 10 of the questions and have loaded those notes as well as the videos. Now with the 9-3 section, I've probably done about the same. So make sure you're taking a look at what we've done and tell your friends. Like right now, I know there's still 6 of you with me, but between both geometry classes, there's 40 of you. And I get we all have our responsibilities and the schedule is a little different. But when I go back and look how many have watched the videos, people say they're struggling, but they're not looking at the videos and they're not looking at the help. So if you have friends who are complaining that things are very difficult and I just can't do it and they're frustrated, I understand. Ask your friends if they've even looked at the videos. Because if they haven't come to the class time when we're live, I worry that they're not even looking at the video and they're doing what many students do. And I'm not going to lie, I did it too. Just try to get the homework done so I get the points and who cares? Well, they're frustrating themselves because they've never even looked to see how to do it. So please encourage the videos and continue to work hard. And I do appreciate you all. So keep checking Google Classroom and I will keep you updated and we will talk soon. Anybody got anything else? And if not, I hope you have a great day. Hopefully there's more sunshine soon. All right, guys, have a great day.
You too.
Thanks.
You too.
Thank you.
Bye, Cap.
Bye, guys.